wasn't built to break land speed records or dominate racetracks. It was designed for durability, reliability, and raw torque. And in that mission, it succeeded beyond anyone's imagination. The Ford 300 wasn't flashy. It didn't roar like a V8 or boast eye-popping horsepower numbers. But under the hood of countless Ford trucks, vans, and industrial machines, it proved itself as nearly unbreakable. Farmers, mechanics, and small business owners quickly learned that this engine could take abuse that would destroy most others. It wasn't uncommon to see a Ford 300-powered truck with over 300,000 miles still working hard on the farm or the job site. What made it so tough? Simplicity and design. With a cast-iron block and head, thick walls, a long stroke, and an emphasis on low-end torque, the 300 was a masterpiece of practical engineering. Its peak horsepower numbers hovered modestly between 101 and 150 depending on the year, but torque was its true weapon. With around 260 lb-ft of torque available at low RPMs, it was a natural fit for trucks, forklifts, and industrial generators. By the mid-1970s, Ford had created an engine that was quickly earning a reputation as the Bulletproof 6. Mechanics noticed it could tolerate poor maintenance, run on low-grade fuel, and survive overheating episodes that would kill most engines. The 300 Inline 6 was becoming a symbol of grit and dependability in an era when automakers were still trying to figure out how to balance emissions rules, fuel economy, and performance. Who worked with a Ford 300 Inline 6, and you'll likely hear a story that borders on unbelievable. Farmers recall running their old F-Series trucks for years without ever cracking the engine open. Construction workers tell tales of Ford vans that idled all day at job sites, running generators and compressors without complaint. One of the most famous uses of the 300 was in U-Haul trucks during the 1970s through the 1990s. Customers overloaded those rental trucks with furniture, appliances, and sometimes livestock, then drove them across the country, often with no idea how to care for an engine. Yet the 300 kept pulling. Mechanics at U-Haul reported that while transmissions, brakes, and suspensions often needed repair, the engines rarely failed. Ford also used the 300 in its heavy-duty F-Series trucks, especially the F-250 and F-350 workhorses. With manual transmissions like the NP435 and heavy-duty 4-speeds, the 300 became legendary for its stump-pulling torque. Farmers claimed it was the perfect engine for hauling hay, pulling trailers, and even dragging tractors out of the mud. It wasn't fast, but it was unstoppable. There are documented stories of Ford 300s running well past 500,000 miles without major rebuilds. Some military applications and industrial settings pushed the engine to limits most designs could never withstand. Oil fields in Texas and Alaska kept 300s running in extreme heat and bitter cold, and the engines never complained. Its design also made it a favorite among hot rodders who wanted durability over flash. While it wasn't a powerhouse out of the box, aftermarket tuners found ways to coax serious performance from the Inline 6. With turbochargers, fuel injection upgrades, and forged internals, the 300 could be transformed into a surprising drag or pulling machine. Ford themselves even offered fuel-injected versions in the 1980s and 1990s, giving the engine a new life in the computer-controlled age. Perhaps the greatest proof of its toughness is this: even when drivers neglected oil changes, overheated their engines, or drove them low on coolant, the Ford 300 often kept running. The phrase, "you can't kill a 300, became a badge of honor in truck forums and mechanic shops. By the late 1990s, the automotive world was changing. Ford began to phase out the 300 Inline 6 in favor of more modern V8s and V6s. In 1996, the last Ford truck rolled off the line with the legendary straight six under its hood. On paper, its replacements were more powerful and more efficient, but for many, the loss of the 300 was the end of an era. But the story didn't end there. Decades later, the reputation of the Ford 300 remains alive and well. In online communities, truck enthusiasts still celebrate its bulletproof nature. Mechanics still compare newer engines to the 300, often saying, "they just don't build them like that anymore." And collectors are restoring old Fords with the 300, knowing that the engine inside is still capable of daily work. The 300 Inline 6 represents something deeply American: toughness, reliability, and practicality over flash. It may not have had the glamour of a Mustang V8 or the prestige of a luxury engine, but it earned respect the hard way. By refusing to quit. Farmers trusted it. Workers relied on it. Mechanics praised it. And generations later, it's still considered one of the most indestructible engines ever built. Some even argue that if Ford had modernized the 300 with today's fuel injection, emissions technology, and turbocharging, it could still be one of the best work truck engines on the market. Instead, it lives on as a symbol of an era when engines were built to last.